Hey, what is up? So yeah, it's been a really long time since I've reviewed season 5 of Better Call Saul. Took a little bit of a break because of all the information that was coming out about season 6. But anyway, with less than a month to go before the premiere of season 6, I thought it'd be a good time to try to finish up reviewing season 5. So without any too much further delay here, I'm going to review the 6th episode of season 5 of Better Call Saul, entitled Wexler v. Goodman. Really looking forward to this one. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so the cold opening scene of this episode presented us with something a little bit unusual. Of course, when this scene first aired, I was a little bit confused as to what was happening. Who was this young little girl here in front of this middle school? But then it's quickly revealed to us that this is none other than a young Kim Wexler, apparently waiting for someone to pick her up after school. It's incredibly late, it's dark out, no one else is at the school besides her. Eventually, we see a car approach and we see a woman apologize for being late, saying that she got held up at a bar. Again, it's not outwardly confirmed to us in this scene, but it is implied that this is Kim Wexler's mom here, who's a sort of alcoholic, if you will, potentially. Someone who definitely skirts her responsibilities of taking care of her daughter to the highest capacity, if you will. So then following Kim realizing that her mom is likely inebriated, she decides to walk home the 3-mile trek instead of riding in the car with her. This prompts her mom to insist that she only had one drink when she's most clearly lying here. Again, a back and forth ensues, and eventually she drives away, telling Kim that she never listens. We then proceed to see Kim walk home, and the camera zooms in on her and thus ends the cold opening scene here of this episode. Now, originally when this episode aired, I wasn't really sure why this scene was presented to us initially as the cold opening, but with the benefit of hindsight of having seen this episode and having seen this entire season, I think the point of this scene was to display to us that Kim was being genuine when she went back to Mr. Acker's house late at night, and she said that she had a sort of, rough upbringing, and that her family did not own a home either. I think that was the premise of this scene, to sort of display to us that Kim was being genuine and helping Mr. Acker here, and sort of just displaying the sort of, not easy go of it that Kim had growing up, to sort of counteract Mr. Acker's insinuations that Kim was this sort of silver spoon person, if you will, who never had a rough go of it. Additionally, the other premise of this cold opening scene will be revealed to us in the next episode of season 5 of Better Call Saul, entitled JMM, and will also be hinted at the very end of this episode. But again, I don't want to give away anything too much here prior to reviewing this episode first. Okay, so after the cold opening scene, Act 1, Scene 1 of this episode picks up with Jimmy and the University of New Mexico students watching an old Mesa Verde commercial. We then see Jimmy ask these students if it will be possible to edit this commercial in such a way for a plan that Jimmy and Kim is enacting, currently unknown to the audience, following the students telling him that this will take weeks, if not more, to create, based on all of the necessities that Jimmy wants, i.e. the different locations, the different costumes, just the technicalities of shooting a commercial like this. This then prompts Jimmy to, in very Saul Goodman fashion, if you will, decide to take a massive shortcut here and decide to do the entire thing at the nail salon with a green screen. This is then followed by a long montage scene of Jimmy and these students with these community theater actors shooting this commercial. Again, we don't know at this point in time what the plan here is and what the premise of this commercial with Kevin Wachtel's father is. But again, a very kind of cool montage scene here. Again, I love a good montage scene in the plot of Better Call Saul. Very well done. Very funny scene here. Again, we didn't know what was going on at the time, but of course, all this is just foreshadowing the final reveal of Jimmy and Kim's plan at the end of this episode. Then following this, the next scene in this act, if you will, is a sort of continuation of the finishing of filming this commercial at the nail salon. We then see Kim Wexler come at the end of this filming when it's pretty much wrapping up and all is said and done. The last person filming is, of course, Jimmy. Jimmy is then interrupted by Kim Wexler, who calls him outside to talk with him, asking him if she thinks that Mr. Acker will settle for $75,000, also stating that irrespective of what Kevin Wachtel and Mesa Verde decide to settle with him, she'll pay the rest of this settlement to Mr. Acker out of pocket. Of course, Jimmy is sort of perplexed here about what she's doing. Kim then reveals to Jimmy that at the end of the previous episode, her boss, Rich Schweigert, surrounding Kim's involvement in this plan with Jimmy, how it was no coincidence that Jimmy was representing Mr. Acker. Rich seeing through the charade and sort of insinuating malfeasance. Of course, Kim doubles down on her lie in an attempt to maybe make Rich call her bluff at the end of the previous episode. But of course, despite this, we see in this episode that Kim is definitely having reservations about going through with this, because if they do go through with this plan, she's afraid that Rich will see right through them and it will be too obvious. And she doesn't want to risk her career, I suppose, is what she's insinuating here. Of course, Jimmy, aka Saul, in very Saul Goodman fashion, tries to convince Kim that there's absolutely nothing they can prove. There's no evidence here, telling Kim that this is a great plan. They should go through with this. They've already done so much work, you know, using the metaphor of just seeing a walk-off home run drift foul. Of course, Saul then tells Kim, okay, I'll oblige. We won't do this plan, even though it was really your plan to begin with to help Mr. Acker. Of course, again, in very Saul Goodman fashion, very much telling a half-truth here with the benefit of hindsight, and this scene really foreshadowing the final culmination of why this episode is named Wexler v. Goodman at the end of this episode. Okay, so following this, scene 2, act 1, then picks up with Nacho Varga. We see him waiting at an abandoned warehouse for what is revealed to us to be Gus Fring. Then, following Gus arriving, we then see off-camera Mike Ehrmantraut appear as well, much to the surprise of Nacho. Of course, this a continuation of the previous episode, Namaste, as well. We're following Mike coming to terms that sulking and feeling sorry for oneself about the past is no way to live one's life. The past cannot be changed. We only can move forward and act accordingly. And following that speech by Gus Fring that clearly appealed to Mike, we now see Mike coming to terms with who he is and really, at this point in time, being the character we first met in the plot of Breaking Bad as a button man for Gus Fring. So anyway, following this revelation that Mike is working for Gus, this is much to Nacho's surprise, telling Mike and Gus as much as he is surprised that this is the Michael that Lalo was talking about. And of course, if Lalo or the Salamancas ever find out, they're both dead. Mike dismissing this notion completely, saying they'll never find out, which again is based on the canon of Breaking Bad, appears to be true, because based on the backstory of Breaking Bad, we never see Hector or the Salamancas discover that Mike is working for Gus Fring. So anyway, with that background being presented, this meeting then displays to us Nacho presenting Gus with insider information regarding Lalo's plan against Gus. It's revealed to us that Lalo wants to undermine Gus Fring's position in the cartel, causing havoc with his business, of using his CI connection, Domingo, aka Crazy 8, to rat out Gus Fring's dealers. Also telling him that he talks about doing all sorts of things to his businesses, such as poisoning his customers at Los Pollos Hermanos, all in an attempt to undermine Gus Fring's standing with the cartel in a way that would make Don Eladio not think Gus Fring is worth it anymore. Following this revelation, Gus Fring then tells Nacho that from now on he reports to Mike in the same manner that he was to report to Gus. If Mike tells him to do something, he should not hesitate. Following a look between Mike and Gus sort of understanding what the plan is here based on this new information, this is then followed by Gus leaving. Following this, we then see this scene as an opportunity for Nacho and Mike to confer here, following Gus leaving. Nacho telling Mike, do you know who you're working for here? Insinuating that Gus is just a ruthless killer who will do anything to get his way. Telling him about how he shot him and left him to die in the desert as part of a long plan against the cartel and the Salamancas. Mike, of course, dismissing this to Nacho, telling him, I warned you about this all the way back in Season 2 of Better Call Saul when he discovered that he was trying to kill Hector, how there were other parties involved who cared about this, sort of insinuating that Nacho made these decisions and he has to live with the consequences of his own actions. Nacho then counteracts this by saying, well, my father didn't, telling Mike in a sort of a personal and emotional appeal that Gus Fring has a gun to his father's head and will kill him if he does not do exactly what Gus Fring says. Mike, sort of understanding this emotional appeal here, tells Nacho, first we deal with Lalo, then we'll discuss this, thus ending this scene in Act 2. Then following this, Scene 2 of Act 2 then picks up with Kim back at Schweigert and Coakley. We see her as well as her boss, Rich Schweigert, having a conference call with Paige at Mesa Verde, telling her that Acker is finally ready to settle. This, of course, is much to Paige's happiness, telling her that Kevin will be over the moon excited about this as well. Kim saying that they'll have a final meeting with Acker's attorney, Mr. Goodman, later to finalize out the details. Following the end of this call, we then see Kim and Rich converse. Kim telling Rich that she apologizes for the way she acted yesterday, saying it was unprofessional of her, sort of trying to mend fences here. Rich sort of understands here, not sort of overtly holding a grudge here surrounding Kim, telling Kim that, it's okay to lose one's shit, and it's all part of the game here. This is a cutthroat business, corporate law, but he says not in front of the troops. You can't demoralize morale like this. Then following this, he sort of agrees to have lunch with Kim and wants them to walk through the office and have everyone in the office see that it's cool. The whole blow up that happened is just water under the bridge. And yeah, that pretty much ends the second scene here in Act 2. Again, sort of a bait and switch here. We sort of see Kim just trying to sort of mend fences here, just try to, fix everything. She's kind of cutting her losses here, doesn't want to push it too far after having Rich sort of discover her plan. And things seem to be going okay for her. She thinks, okay, I'm going to get away with this. Everything's going to be cool. But of course, with the benefit of hindsight, things do not go according to plan for Kim in this episode. Then following this, Scene 3 of Act 2 then picks up with Mike Ehrmantraut. We then see him go to a public library. It's then revealed to us that this is part of a long plan to meet with the only witness of the Travel Wire murder, this woman, the librarian who works there. He poses there as a private detective, saying that he wants to give the family closure. This, of course, all part of a long ruse in order to have this librarian amend her statement in order to provide the police with the necessary information to arrest Lalo. Of course, the reason why Mike wants Lalo arrested here is because it's on the orders of Gus Fring, because Gus no longer wants Lalo able to sort of undermine his businesses while free. He'd rather him be in jail, which would make it, of course, more difficult, it appears. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that Lalo is still able to run and control things while in prison. But again, the point of this scene here in this episode is to get this librarian to amend her statement in order for the Albuquerque Police Department to be able to arrest Lalo here later in this episode. Then, following this, the fourth and final scene in this act then picks up at the Bernalillo County Courthouse with Saul, Goodman, and two of his clients. Two overtly obvious prostitutes here, following Saul, for lack of a better term here, getting them off of their charges, it seems. This then follows with Saul rejecting their thank you, if you will, of their services, maybe done pro bono. Anyway, following Saul telling them to, take it easy and trying to get picked up again. Then following a sort of brief moment of introspection, we see Saul run back to these women and ask them how much for an hour of their time. Of course, here, this is not for Saul, but it's revealed to us in a continuation of this scene that Saul is going to send these two women to Howard Hamlin's business lunch with Clifford Maine in order to embarrass him, a sort of continuation of sort of Saul's anger here at Howard for, I suppose, offering him the job at HHM in the episode entitled Namaste. Then following this at the restaurant, following Howard just having, small talk cordialities with Clifford Maine and the other members of the Albuquerque legal community at this restaurant, as he always does. This is then interrupted by these two women accosting Howard in this restaurant, demanding payment, insinuating that a man named Joe Dog is unhappy and requires payment. Again, when I first watched this scene here, I have to say that part of me definitely felt pretty bad for Howard here, the sort of just overt cynicism that is being displayed at him towards Jimmy, sort of embarrassing him here at this restaurant. At the same time, though, I have to admit that after watching the scene a couple of times, there is a great deal of humor here. I mean, the way Howard said, "I don't know any Joe Dog or tugboats," I mean, an unbelievable reading here, in my opinion, by Patrick Fabian as an actor. I really enjoyed this scene here. Of course, then following these women sort of screaming at Howard and making a huge scene here, following their demanding of payment. Of course, this is a total fabrication, and it's revealed to us, of course, Saul is looking through the window of this restaurant, sort of laughing, providing his own commentary to what's going on here, saying, damn, he's good for thinking up this sort of practical joke on Howard. Then following this, we see Saul place a phone call to Olivia Bitsui, a photographer who is part of Kim and Jimmy's plan here against Mesa Verde. This then ends the scene, thus ending Act 2 in this episode. Again, the phone call Jimmy places at the end of the scene, a big foreshadow for what is to come at the end of this episode as well. Then, following this, scene 1 of Act 3 then picks up at the Albuquerque police station. We then see Mike Ehrmantraut posing as a police officer here, and he sort of gets a low-level employee here to deliver the necessary information to Detective Roberts in order to get Lalo arrested. Of course, some very cool scenes here in this episode. We see Mike sort of use his knowledge as a police officer to sort of understand how things get done in a police office. Really funny scene here, how even though he's a total imposter who shouldn't be there, he's still able to instill the fear of this low-level employee of not doing his job, sort of understanding the rank and fileness and the roles of subordinates and superiors in a police station. I thought this was pretty cool. Again, the point of the scene is to sort of provide Detective Tim Roberts with the new information that the librarian provided to arrest Lalo here. That is what the culmination of this scene displays to us. Of course, foreshadowing Lalo's arrest later in this episode. Just as a quick side note here, the appearance here of Detective Tim Roberts was the first appearance of this character, who was originally seen in the plot of Breaking Bad. Again, sort of a very cool, very minor cameo here in the plot of Better Call Saul in this episode. Okay, so then following this, the next scene in this act then picks up with the meeting that was foreshadowed to us earlier in this episode of Mesa Verde and Schweigert and Coakley meeting with Saul Goodman in order to finalize the settlement of Mr. Acker's dispute. Of course, following the initial sort of belief that Saul is on board here with Kim's plan to not enact their initial plan of undermining Mesa Verde and attacking Kevin Wachtel personally. Then following Saul demanding $4 million as opposed to the initial $35 that they were willing to settle. Then following all members of this party realizing that this is absurd, they're not going to give him this money. This is then followed by Saul, unbeknownst to Kim Wexler, enacting the plan that she did not want to enact earlier in this episode, where Saul displays to these people the commercials he was shooting at the nail salon, which display to us commercials for plaintiffs seeking a class action lawsuit against Mesa Verde for these over-the-top claims against the bank as well as Kevin's father in the past. Everyone dismisses this as slander and libel and not true. Of course, Jimmy's saying the commercials were run anyway and that they can argue about it in court. Of course, irrespective of that, Kevin knows that if these commercials are aired in the first place, this will ruin Mesa Verde's reputation. Jimmy also files an injunction against Mesa Verde here on top of this, based on the cowboy logo for Mesa Verde being the intellectual property of Olivia Bitsui, who the bank did not obtain permission to use this photograph from, and thus owes compensation to her as well. What's very interesting about this scene is we could just see the overt anger Kim displays here at Jimmy for enacting this plan, because even though this was her plan initially, sort of, as we learned at the end of the last episode and she signed off on it, she really took Jimmy at his word that they would not go through with this. But of course, in this scene, we see Jimmy completely undermine and blindside Kim here and go forth with this plan to attack Mesa Verde and Kevin Wachtel personally in order to help Mr. Acker. Again, following Jimmy leaving the scene, this scene then zooms in on Kim's face. We just see this sort of visceral anger that she's containing here in this scene. The culmination of this scene will finally be displayed to us in the very last scene of this episode. This scene thus ending Act 3. Then, following this, the fourth and final act of this episode then continues at Schweigert and Coakley, where we see Kevin Wachtel's legal team discussing what they can do in order to counteract Saul's potential lawsuits and threats here. Amidst all of the conversation, we can really see Kevin not even really paying attention to what is being said right now. He's sort of in tunnel vision right now, being totally introspective. This then, following the camera zooming up on Kevin, we see Kevin get up from his desk and walk out. Kim warns Kevin to not do anything rash here. Of course, under the guise that he just has to use the men's room, we then see him call Saul Goodman to hash out this discussion man to man. And so after meeting in the parking lot with Jimmy, Jimmy lays out the terms of the settlement here, where Mr. Acker will be allowed to keep his house and receive $75,000 in payment, as well as a public apology from Mesa Verde, while Olivia Bitsui will receive $100,000 as sort of back payment for future use and credit of the bank's cowboy and horse logo. In exchange for this, Jimmy agrees to drop all of the potential lawsuits and injunctions here against Mesa Verde. But yeah, this is a pretty interesting scene here. We see the whole premise of Jimmy and Kim's plan here come to final culmination, which also, of course, foreshadows the very final scene in this episode. Alright, so following this, the next scene in this final act here then picks up with Mike receiving a phone call from Nacho Varga telling him about the whereabouts of Lalo Salamanca. Then following this, we then see Mike pose as a police officer here to provide the dispatcher with the exact location of Lalo Salamanca. Then following this, we see Lalo pull up to a stop sign. We then see a police officer approach him from behind in his car. This is then followed by Lalo being completely surrounded by the police. Following Lalo considering pulling out his gun and entering a firefight here, he then understands he's totally outmanned and obviously taking out his gun would result in his death. So he then decides to give himself up here and throw the keys out the window, being resigned to the fact that he's going to be arrested, thus ending this scene here where we see Gus Fring's plan in this episode come to full effect where Lalo is able to be arrested. Of course, this scene further foreshadows what will come of Lalo in the final 4 episodes of this season, which in my opinion are probably the 4 best episodes of the entire season. Then following this, the very last scene in this episode then presents us with Saul at home, waiting for Kim to return. When she arrives, Saul asks her how everything went. Kim tells him that Kevin agreed to their settlement offer. Saul here, being very sort of overtly happy, asks Kim to sort of revert to the sort of playful voice that they were using in the previous episode to mock Kevin Wachtel. Of course, Kim, being in no mood here, being visibly upset, dismisses that completely. We can see Saul initially, after sort of trying to make this a sort of lighthearted situation, then understand that Kim is very upset here, and then tries to assuage her feelings here, telling her that everything went according to plan, that by undermining her and making her anger seem real, because it was real, there's no way that Rich Swigert could think that Kim was in on this plan, making her look completely innocent, and at the same time, everybody wins. Mr. Acker gets to stay on his home. Mesa Verde will build their call center somewhere else, which we learned will really not be a sort of economic distressor for them. Olivia Bitsui gets compensated for her photograph. Everybody wins, according to Saul. The ends justify the means. But of course, Kim then states to Saul, "You win, Jimmy." Of course, I mix up those names all the time because they're basically the same character. Kim basically telling Jimmy that she no longer trusts him because of this, saying that you made me the sucker in this scam. You undermined me. This is then, of course, followed by some back and forth saying, "How did I undermine you? This was your plan." Kim basically tells Jimmy outright to go fuck himself. This is then followed by Kim basically insinuating that she can't do this anymore, that she can't put up with this lying and this undermining, and that basically insinuating that they have to end this relationship. Of course, Jimmy being absolutely not wanting this to happen whatsoever, saying, "No, we can make this work out, we can make this work out." And while this scene is going on, I have to say that there's been so many times over the course of this series that I have told myself, this is it. This is when this relationship will finally end. I mean, whether it was when it was revealed to Kim that Jimmy was selling the burner phones without her knowledge, or at the end of season 4 of Better Call Saul, where Jimmy changes his name to Saul Goodman to practice the law under after saying that the appeal board hearing at the bar were a bunch of suckers. So many times over the course of this series, I think this is it. This is when this relationship finally ends. But of course, to a huge surprise here and a curveball I did not see coming whatsoever, we then see that instead of ending this relationship, Kim then offers Jimmy, "Or we could get married," which then ends this episode on this cliffhanger. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we learn Kim's plan here in the following episode. I don't want to give anything too much away here. I'll discuss that plot much more in depth in my review of JMM, the next episode of Season 5 of Better Call Saul. But yeah, pretty interesting episode here overall. Really enjoyed it. It was a final culmination of this plot of Mr. Acker and Mesa Verde. It really was the final nail in this plot. And it also, in hindsight, was a huge character development plot in respect to the relationship status of Jimmy and Kim, which will be displayed to us over the course of the final 4 episodes of Better Call Saul. Again, a huge cliffhanger here that I did not see coming whatsoever in regards to their marriage. With the benefit of hindsight, I should have seen the writing on the wall here based on that infamous deleted scene from season 3 of Breaking Bad where it was revealed to us that Saul was married 3 times. Again, that will be addressed in the next episode as well. Don't want to go into too much detail here. But anyway, great episode here. Pretty much primarily focused on the plot of Jimmy and Kim here and the law, and not as much on the plot of Gus Fring and the cartel and Lalo Salamanca. I mean, Lalo appears in only one scene at the very end to get arrested, but of course we'll get a lot more of Lalo and the cartel in the final 4 episodes of Season 5 of Better Call Saul that also impacts Saul as well as Kim. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you guys on this one. Really great to review this episode. It was a long time coming for sure. Definitely planning on reviewing the final 4 episodes before the premiere of Season 6 in less than a month from now. As always, my name is Anton Jackson. Thank you again so much for watching this video.